What you are about to hear and see is a Substack Live that I did with economist, author, and former Secretary of Labor Robert Reich. Robert has been a leading progressive voice for decades. His work as a professor at UC Berkeley, as a best-selling author, as a filmmaker has really shaped the national conversation about inequality and about democracy. His latest book is Coming Up Short, a memoir of my America. It just hit the shelves this month and hit #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. He's also featured in the new documentary, The Last Class, which captures his final semester teaching at UC Berkeley, and also his urgent message about fighting inequality and defending democracy. We'll have links in the show notes where you can find both the book and the documentary. Check them out. Here is our conversation. Well, it is great to be joined today by Robert Reich. It's been too long since we last spoke. We, of course, have spoken before about your work as a professor, as an author, as Bill Clinton's Secretary of Labor in the early 90s during I guess I would call it my political awakening. I really learned about political scandal as a young boy in the early 90s. It's great to see you. I really appreciate you talking to me today.
Well, thank you, David. It's good to see you too.
I've been following your Substack with great interest, both for the content of what you're writing, but also even just your presence on the platform as something that even just in the last few years has really become sort of a central hub for people to be in direct contact with audiences that value what they have to say and want to hear from them. I'd love, before we even get into some of the substantive matters that I have to talk to you about, which are numerous, give me a little bit of your sense of the platform, your experience on Substack, what you think, pros, cons, if there are any, to the platform.
It's ideal for me because I can do as much or as little as I want. I don't feel like I'm working for anybody. I feel like I'm working for people who I am actually addressing or who are reading. And I love the comments. It's a very sophisticated, interesting, thoughtful group of people who are reading and commenting. And so for me, at my, age and and abilities, it's ideal.
What is your sense of, I think one of the changes in the kind of landscape of media that's taken place lately, including as we've seen former legacy journalists from big newspapers, for example, go independent and choose Substack or other platforms. Sometimes it's after they've had a falling out with their employer. Sometimes it's after there's been a scandal or a pseudo scandal or a manufactured scandal. But there seems to be a growing preference among some Americans to take out the intermediary in a sense. I don't necessarily care if you are reporting for the Washington Post, as an example, or the New York Times or Newsweek. I would rather a more direct, and some would say parasocial type relationship with the people that I'm reading or getting my news from. Do you think that says anything more broadly about society's expectations, that there seems to be a growing preference for that type of news consumption?
I think it's fine, and I am all for it up to a point. But I think that there is something lost, when we all, as Americans, no longer share the same news sources, or when we don't know that others are viewing the same things we are viewing, when we don't have the perennial Walter Cronkites. Then we lose a little bit of social glue. We lose that sense that we're all in it together, and I frankly worry about that. I also worry that people may be coming to Substack as journalists because they are no longer welcome at places like, for example, the Washington Post. They don't feel that Jeff Bezos can be trusted because he's no longer allowing them as columnists to write what they want to write. It's a we or 60 Minutes, let's say, people who might be coming to Substack as journalists, uh, posting on Substack from 60 Minutes or from CBS. I just think that this gets us to the larger topic of wealth and power and the concentrated wealth and concentrated power in our society. I think that Substack offsets some of that but it is really in response to a much, much larger problem of concentration of wealth and power.
Let's talk a little bit about that as we sort of enter some of the more maybe timely topics or discussions. I try always with my audience not to understate a threat, but also not to hyperbolically overstate it. I mean, I basically just do the best I can to say, here's how concerned I am about whatever the topic might be. And especially over the last few weeks, as we've seen these federal deployments of law enforcement for domestic law enforcement in DC and now threats in other parts of the country. As we saw Donald Trump today say, for example, that with an executive order, he will make burning the American flag punishable with a year in prison, which the lawyers I had time to speak to said there's no actual provision or mechanism where you can do that with an executive order. But let's put that aside. It's something the president seems to want to do. I would love to hear from you how, what level of concern about these authoritarian slides should we have? I don't want to overstate or understate.
Well, I share your concern about not overstating or understating, David. And I certainly, in my Substack and other in videos, I try not to be alarmist, but I am becoming more and more alarmed. The slide into this kind of neo-fascism is very, very quick. And I think that the underlying institutions of American democracy, well, they've been falling apart. They're not nearly as strong, much more fragile than I thought they were. And it's not just Trump's going into all these cities and Trump uh, basically arresting or investigating, using the Justice Department for his own personal uses. I mean, John Bolton and I mean, I've never agreed with John Bolton about anything, but for John Bolton, simply for because he criticized Donald Trump to be investigated, to me is well, it just goes to the core of what we are talking about in terms of losing our rights and freedoms. Donald Trump cannot tolerate any kind of criticism. I mean, he is trying to control our universities and our media and our law firms and all of the all of the sources of independent motives and independent thinking and independent criticism in this country. He's following the fascist, the totalitarian playbook very, very quickly. And he's doing it quickly because I think that we are still, so many of us, in a state of shock or denial or despair. And as fast as he moves, we can't catch up with him in terms of processing everything that's happening. So back to your question, I am trying not to be alarmist. I'm certainly trying not to be despairing, but this is the worst I've ever seen.
I was reading today that as a result of this, the number of citizenship applications by Americans in Ireland are at a record high. There are Americans going to Canada and requesting refugee status. It's a lot of trans Americans and other members of the LGBTQ community. I'm often I asked Heather Cox Richardson about this, and she had a framework that she kind of presented, which is sometimes people call and they say, "Listen, David, I have a trans daughter, or I'm in a very red part of my state, and I try to advocate for my kids at school, and it's extraordinarily hostile. I'm thinking about leaving." And I always kind of struggle when I'm talking to folks like this because on the one hand, I know that at the wholesale level, if everybody with the right instincts leave, we're ceding control completely to those with the worst instincts. At the retail level, as we might call it, of the individual family, how could I ever say to someone who's identified a threat and says, I've found a path out? No, don't go because we all need to stay and fight. There's this sort of seeming tension between at the 30,000-foot level fighting and at the family level doing what's best for your family. What's your thought about this apparent tension?
Well, first of all, most, 98% of Americans can't afford the luxury of leaving the country. They don't have any contacts abroad. They couldn't. It's not clear how they could make a living. They don't have the savings they need to do that. So we're talking about really a very small number of people. But the issue comes up again and again in a slightly different way in terms of the people I talk with. And that is, they say to me, should I just give up? Should I basically be so hopeless that I just don't force myself to become crazy. Why fight this? I mean, he's going to be out of office. He's 79 years old. He's not going to live forever. This is not like communist China, or it's not like a totalitarian state where the leader is there forever. He's an old, crazy man. Uh, but what I worry about most with that attitude, and it's analogous to leaving the country, um, what I worry about is that if we physically or psychologically give up, if we move out or move out in our heads, we are giving them, that is the neo-fascists, the Trumpers, everything they want. We are ceding our country to them. They want us to give up. They want us to leave the country. If we can't leave the country, they'd like us to basically say, nothing is going to change. It's hopeless. You're going to get it all. Well, we've got to continue to fight, David, and you know that as well as I do. We have to stay and fight. The stakes are too great, not just for our children and grandchildren, not just for the United States, but for the entire world.
When you think about, I don't know, 2026, 2028, just the kind of forthcoming elections, I want to be delicate but also honest here, which is I've had several dozen Democratic elected officials on my show over the last few months. And for the most part, I don't come away from these conversations saying, wow, we are really well equipped here for what we are up against. I mean, there are some exceptions. I spoke to Gavin Newsom last week, and whatever one's opinion of his politics are, he's fighting in a way I don't see a ton of people willing to fight right now. The strongly worded letters aren't really doing it for me right now. So I guess I want to get your sense of, when you look at the Democratic Party right now, do you see a party that is well equipped and ready and willing to do what you think needs to happen over the next couple of cycles? Or is it a rebuilding period, or where are we?
Um, well, one of the greatest disappointments of my life is the Democratic Party, because I saw it. I'm old enough to remember when it was basically a populist progressive party. I remember, my father and my grandfather and everybody else, they were part of a Democratic Party in the 1930s and 40s that really did have its feet in the working class and in labor and the labor movement. And what I have witnessed during my lifetime is a Democratic Party that actually just has become a giant fundraising machine that is worried about the suburban swing vote and is worried about getting the next campaign contribution from another big corporation or another wealthy person. Uh, I think the Democratic Party as a party is pretty much, and I hate to say this because the Republican Party is a cult and they're a zombie group of dangerous people. The Democratic Party really almost doesn't exist as a force. It's a very, very big tent. I like big tents, but it's such a big tent that it almost doesn't have any center. It doesn't have any tent pole. Uh, I do like individuals around the country who call themselves Democrats, who are very close to my values, and that is a populist progressive value. That I think we have to fight corporations and corporate power, and also uh, very, very wealthy individuals who are abusing their power by turning their money into politics. I think that's a very core problem we have to deal with. And uh, the agony that we're going through, the nightmare that we are going through right now with Donald Trump, may be an opportunity for us to uh, redefine who the Democratic Party is, what we must do, what we as progressives or populists, whatever we want to call ourselves, must do to get big money out of politics and to make sure that when this nightmare is over, if it is ever over, that we have a stronger democracy, that we have a wider net of people who are benefiting from the productivity improvements in the economy, and that we have a Democratic Party that's really fighting.
When you hear the debate about to win, the Democratic Party must move to the left or move to the center, is your reaction the answer is one of those two things, or is your reaction that's the wrong question,
Oh,
actually?
I think it's the stupidest question I can imagine. I mean, first of all, there's what kind of center is there between fascism and democracy? Because those are the two poles right now. You don't choose a middle point between fascism and democracy. There is none. Uh, Secondly, left. What does left mean now? What does right mean? I mean, what we're really talking about is being effective, being powerful, being bold, having a message that people will latch onto because it resonates with their own personal experience. And we know uh, that right now, the median wage, the typical working person in this country, is struggling. Struggling as much, if not more, than that person has been struggling for anywhere in the last 50 years. Prices are going up. They're going up actually faster than they were before. Uh, Jobs are less secure than they were. Job growth is almost not occurring at all. The Democratic Party has got to be a fighter for average working people and has got to say, no, we are not going to accept this. These are all political choices, and we are going to make political choices and fight for a politics that is basically centered on the average working person in America.
What does economic policy centered around that group of people look like? And I'll contextualize that in this way. There are many things Kamala Harris arguably did right during her relatively 107-day campaign, relatively short campaign, and some things she did wrong. One of the things that struck me as very poorly calibrated were the policy ideas around economics. There was this thing which I struggle to even explain now, which was it was either a deduction or a credit against expenses to start a new business. And I just thought this is not really what we need right now, but I don't know what we do need. I mean, from a policy standpoint, what should the Democratic Party be offering that would genuinely help this large middle that you're talking about?
Well, number one, fighting monopolies. I mean, one of the reasons the prices are going up so fast is that you've got in food and the food industry and in many other industries, you've got just a handful of major players that are setting prices and are coordinating price increases. Fight monopolies. The Biden administration did it pretty well. There were some very, very good people in the Biden administration that were starting to put monopoly and antitrust where it should be. Number two, support and strengthen labor unions. Labor unions are down in the private sector. We're down to 6% of the private sector is now unionized. You can't have any countervailing power to big corporations unless you have strong unions. Number three, I mentioned get big money out of politics. There are ways of doing it. We don't have to have, but I think we may have to settle for a constitutional amendment if that's necessary. But we've got to get big money out of politics. And we could spend a whole hour or 3 hours or maybe a week talking about that, David, but I think it's critically important. And we could go on. I mean, I think Medicare for all is something that the time has come for. I talk every day. I hear or talk with people who have lost their health insurance or cannot possibly afford the health care they need, and the environment. I mean, climate change, wind and solar are essential. And this administration is going in the opposite direction. Now, those are six things I just mentioned. Is it so hard for Democrats or for a Democratic candidate or for Democratic leadership to just simply stick to those six things?
What's the right way in your mind of not getting drawn into some of these contrived culture war issues every election, but not appearing to be either uncaring or insensitive to what maybe represents a genuine concern from some of the electorate. And this might be, the trans sports issue, or pick your battle, right? The PTA, mask people, or whatever. What's the right way to handle when the right, and you have to hand it to them, they put a bunch of money into figuring out what's the right way to talk about these issues such that if they don't engage, they look bad. They've done their homework on the way to present these issues to a degree. How should Democrats handle that?
I think instead of cultural populism, which is what the Republicans have been developing, the Democrats use economic populism. They say, look, we're not saying that the cultural issues are unimportant. We understand, but this is all about power. This is all about brutality. It's about the powerful who are brutalizing the weak. We Democrats stand for the opposite. We stand for empowering those without power. We stand for stopping the brutalization. Whether we're talking about Gaza or we're talking about transgender people, it's the same point. We're not going to allow the powerful to brutalize the unpowered, the people who are disempowered, the people who are vulnerable, the people who really are at risk with regard to a system or a world in which there are no constraints on the powerful.
And
It's fundamentally a moral issue.
in the context of a campaign, or even in the context of debates, do you think that, how would you rank how well Democrats have done at dealing with that in the right way?
Not well at all. What do you mean? Give a grade? I'm a professor. I give out grades. I give Democrats a C minus, maybe
Okay.
maybe a D, or possibly an F, uh, because again, too many are afraid to take on the powers that be. Too many are afraid to bite the hands that feed them, in terms of big corporations and very wealthy people abusing their wealth and power.
If we zoom out a little bit and think about the next, let's call it 3+ years of Trump, but maybe it's a little less or more depending on what happens in the House in 2026 and how much of a bulwark the House could maybe become against some of what Trump wants to do. There are varied ideas as to the best way to handle the next few years. One is use the courts. It doesn't get the headlines that the declaration from Trump gets, but we've been successful, some will say, at eventually stopping some of these bad ideas by using the courts, and that should be the focus. Or it should be fighting fire with fire, using ballot referenda, doing what Gavin Newsom is doing anything we can in sort of that mold to try to stop what is happening. Or it should be civil disobedience and mass rallies in urban centers to shut down industry, or all of the above type things. On a practical sense, us in the media as content creators, and then also your average voter who follows this stuff, what's most effective in your mind?
All of the above. And I don't want people to think that, oh, it's got to be protests, or, oh, it's got to be a boycott, of companies that are caving into Trump, or, oh, it's got to be civil disobedience, or, we have to do it all. And again, I'm old enough to remember the civil rights movement and the anti-Vietnam War movement. I mean, we did it all. People reached for whatever tool they had. Uh, and if you give up a tool, you're giving in to tyranny. No, every single thing we have to be doing.
Is this an environment where it's an administration that will weaponize law enforcement more than any in recent history against those that choose to use those tools? I mean, I think the answer is obviously yes, but to what degree? And is that part of the design to make people afraid to do the things you're talking about, and how you deal with that fear, which I think is warranted in a lot of cases?
Of course, it's warranted, but you don't. Here's the thing, David. You have to be very, very smart about, for example, demonstrating. You don't want everybody, for example, right now to descend on Washington, D.C., because that's what Trump wants. He wants to be able uh, to say that the Insurrection Act is necessary and he wants to stage a showing of brute force against what he considers to be the left or the people who are demonstrating. No, you want demonstrations. If we're talking about demonstrations right now, you want them to be decentralized. You want them to be exactly like the No King's Day demonstration of June 14th was. It was all over the country, and it was hugely effective, and it made Donald Trump's stupid military parade on his birthday look stupid, just dumb. Made it diminished Trump, and it strengthened the people, and that's what we want to do. Everything we do, um, I mean, for even calling the congressional switchboard and talking to your representatives, or registering with your representatives and your senators that you want this and don't want that, that's important. It's not a huge thing, but it's very important. I've been on the Hill, I've worked on the Hill, and they actually keep track of how many people call in and express their views on this or that matter, particularly constituents. You know, or look at the boycott. The boycott of Tesla was a big deal. And I could give you other boycotts that have had similar real world effects. Businesses spend gigantic amounts of money on their brand images. They don't want anything that tarnishes their brand images. So if we take companies and organizations that really are caving into Trump and focus on them and just simply not buy from them, that's a big deal itself as well.
I
Smart.
want to get your thoughts on education a little bit in this context as someone in academia. I have little kids and I have their 529 accounts going, right? I'm sort of like going through these motions of 15 and 18 years from now, when they get to college age, it's still going to make sense to kind of do the tours and apply and get your recommendations and spend 4 years there. But I also have kind of in the back of my mind, to a great degree because of the cost of college relative to the salaries that they would expect to earn, that I just don't really know if the paradigm that's been kind of growing about going to college is necessarily going to be relevant in 15 and 18 years when the time would come for them to go to college. So that's like on one side. And maybe there's more value in starting your work experience 4 years earlier, or if they're interested in entrepreneurship or other paths. That's one side. The other side of it is that I remember Rick Santorum 15 years ago talking about college is liberal indoctrination. We're just never going to have them on our side. So we just have to damage colleges and universities as much as possible. That's the path forward. And now we see the demonization that's taking place of higher learning. I would love to hear from you as someone inside of it. We know the path that the right is taking. I'm just sort of thinking about it as a cost versus wages and this sort of thing. What's your sense of the direction of higher education right now?
Well, the higher education is really at least two different worlds. One is the world of elite private schools, and the other world is the world of public universities, including community colleges. I think the second uh, is worthy of a huge amount of investment and time and energy. I teach at a public university, University of California, Berkeley. I'm very proud of it. I think it's fabulous. I love my students. And even though I have actually technically retired, I'm just between us. I'm still teaching. But I think that we have, and I'm zooming out now to 30,000 feet. I think as a society, we have bought into a very dangerous conceit, which is that the only way you get into the middle class is if you have a 4-year college degree. That's crazy. There are a lot of students, a lot of young people who should not have to do that. One of my sons, Sam, dropped out of high school, never looked back. And now Sam is doing some pretty terrific stuff. Uh,
I follow him. He's doing really great stuff. Yeah.
and but that's just one example. I also urge undergraduates to take time out. Don't just go directly to graduate school. Don't go to law school. Don't go to business school. Don't just take time out, even in the course of your 4 years. take time out, maybe a year out. I urge high school students to do the same thing. Don't go directly to college if you can afford not to. In fact, some of you can't afford to go directly to college. So take a year or two out and make some money and see the world and discover some things about yourself.
That's super, super interesting. Professor Reich, we are at the end of our time. I can't tell you how grateful I am for your time. I saw that Paul Krugman recently joined the stream, and we've been trying to get a hold of him. I would love to have a conversation with him as well, so maybe we could make that happen. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing. I always appreciate getting your mailings via Substack, and I look forward to doing it again with you.
Thank you very much, David.
Take care. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.